So, welcome to another conversation for Alice in Dunderland. This is Nina Angelo. Nina was born in Athens, Greece, and migrated to Sydney in June 1949 with her parents, both survivors of the Nazi concentration camps. In the early 60s, Nina nourished her passion as an artist at the National Art School, experimenting with many art forms before settling on her lifelong journey with textiles. Her community work and artistic and cultural heritage led her on countless adventures across Australia, the Pacific Islands, and back to Europe. Nina has founded, coordinated, publicised, taught, and workshopped creative and community arts and festival events for over 30 years. She's a colourful character with a gift for connection with people of all ages and cultures. In 2009, Nina was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for her service to the arts and the New South Wales Central Coast community. Her wider Australian contribution to community and culture has been recognised through a range of honours, awards and positions, including Artist in Residence in Fiji through Australia Council for the Arts, 2 Australia Day Community Awards, the Governor of New South Wales Children's Week Award for her work in remote locations, and an Edna Ryan Feminist Award for her life's work empowering women and sharing their stories through the arts. Nina's first book, a memoir called Don't Cry, Dance, celebrates and honours life, love, family and tolerance of people from all cultures, colours and creeds. She discovered her father Alberto's interviews from 30 years ago, which had been held in the Holocaust Museum in the USA, and combined these with her mother Janka's story, who first met her father in Auschwitz. As a storyteller and artist, it was time to add her story. Nina is a connector of the creative dots in communities. She's a motivational speaker, arts consultant, mentor, intuitive artist, registered marriage celebrant, writer and activist. So, Nina, welcome to Alice in Dunderland. And we've had a conversation about what you would like to speak about. So, just go.
I suppose my life started as an artist. People ask, when did you know you were an artist? I think I always was. I didn't even know the name artist, but I always needed to create, put my feelings down. The difference was, instead of drawing on paper or even the walls, I used to draw on my sheets and pillowcases when I was a child. I had a very interesting and I guess, well, what can I say? It was a life of many countries, many nationalities, many colours. My parents celebrated life all the time. After going through Auschwitz and losing all their family, apart from 2 uncles, and my grandfather who died when I was 8. When you lose everyone, for my parents, they never became victims of it, and I was their firstborn. So I came out with a very optimistic attitude to life, and I always have had that. But in my life growing up, the parties, there were often 13, 17 nationalities at our place. There were people always there. There was dancing, there was music. And although my parents never really got me, they always thought I was a bit different, they used to give me whatever I needed to express myself, and I'm so grateful to them for that. I am a mother of twins. Their father was a Vietnam vet, so war had also affected us and my children as well. But I chose the arts and expressing myself during those difficult times as a single mother of twins, through poetry. I had a studio, like a garage at the back of my house in Terrigal. I used to go there and do my fabric art, and I found I was the only person doing it, and I didn't have a lot of money. I had very few paints, I had very few screens, but I managed to do a lot of work, and eventually I was asked to work on festivals and events, doing big banners and flags to line streets for their festivals, working with community. And then we start listening to stories and sharing stories. So as a storyteller, I'm passionate about stories. I called my little business The Fabric of Our Lives. It's all our stories interwoven, just like a fabric, just like a tapestry, and all the different colours. Many, many years passed before I had a chance and an opportunity and decided that I needed to leave the story of our family for my children and my grandchildren, and for those that come my great-grandchildren, so that they know who they are. If we know who we are, if we know where we come from on this earth, we have an identity. But when you don't have any family at all, like I didn't, apart from my mum and dad and my uncles, we don't know our stories. There's nowhere to go back and ask for stories, and it was all taken during the Holocaust. But my mum had written her story for us, and she sat down, I think it was in the 1960, and for us she wanted to leave us a little bit about herself. My mum, Yanka, she died in 1985, and she came to a point when she had been writing her story where she just couldn't write anymore because the Gestapo had got her and it was taking her back. She was on one of those old typewriters. And so I said, look, how about we actually do an interview and tell me the rest of your story? And we did that. Unfortunately, I had a house fire, and her story was burnt in the house fire, the tapes. I've had 2 house fires, so I lost all that. But by some miracle, that bit of wad of paper, which was the first part of her story, somehow managed to survive. With my poetry, I found it in a box up in the garage at the back of my house. So the house had burnt down, but that part had been saved, and I was so grateful. I decided for my 70th birthday, or for that I would put together these stories so my kids would know who they were and what they came from. Because when you're a child, you don't really think about any of that. You're just living each day and enjoying each day and playing and going out with your friends. And so I started working on this book, Don't Cry, Dance. As I was telling my mum's story, I also met these people who did some research for me, and I found my dad's story in the Holocaust Museum in Washington in the United States. He never talked about his life as a Greek Jewish man, but he was part of the Socialist Party in Greece. So when he was caught by the Nazis in Greece, he was actually caught as a political prisoner. He was with the resistance fighters in the mountains, but he ended up in Auschwitz as well. So I spent 3 years writing in the first person, my mum talking to you, and my dad, his words as if they are talking to you with their accents and everything, and my own story as a first generation child of the Holocaust. After the launch of this book, it was in September at the Jewish Museum in Sydney, 2019, and up here where I live on the Central Coast. I was feeling very ill. I was losing a lot of weight, and I really felt that I had been grieving for my family as I was going over and over the experiences that my family had gone through, which I didn't know about until I started doing this. And I went to a doctor because I wasn't well, and I found out that I had this stage 4 lymphoma, which is a whole lot of rogue blood cells, a cancer of the blood. When they actually did the scans to find out what was the matter, they found it right through my body. And it was a stage 4, it was fairly far gone. But I was determined to try and do everything in my power to move this on. As it happened, I started having chemo. I decided that I would use the time having chemo, thinking of that dripping in my blood, because I didn't want to do that. I ended up also taking medicinal cannabis oil, which helped a lot. But while I was in the hospital having the chemo, I decided that I would think about this dripping into me as liquid gold, and that I would change it and it would be healing my body, instead of thinking of it as a medicine, as something that was foreign to my body. It was gold washing away everything. And so while I was sitting there for hours and it was happening to me, I started doing an artwork. I'm an intuitive artist, so what I do is I just go with my feeling, whatever I feel. I don't do a lot of planning. I used to when I was doing a fabric art, working on big banners and flags and working in community. But in this instance, I was just letting it flow. And I did that art piece called Bloodlines right through the making of the chemo journey. I was down for about 9 months. And as I came through my last chemo, COVID hit. It stopped everybody. Everyone was in lockdown. It wasn't difficult for me because I had been in lockdown anyway for a lot of months. My immune system was very low, and so it was just a matter of staying inside a bit more. But I beat this lymphoma, and as my body was stronger and my mind and my heart has always been strong, I wanted to get out there and speak to this and speak about what had happened. But what had happened and what was happening was really what started stirring me up. So I did a few talks after we were allowed out of lockdown. I went into a school during International Women's Day. I was a visitor in the school up there with the year 10 who have to do the Holocaust studies. I was thrilled because it was the first time I could get out and talk. I addressed a club, a service club, that went down really well. I have a really good PowerPoint presentation. And then the next day I was invited into Gosford, Kincumber, the library. It was Refugee Week, and they asked me if I'd be a living book and tell the story. We had 2 sessions which were full. I was so happy to be able to speak about this, and then the very next day we were locked down again. And that's how it's been for months and months and months. But what I was doing during this time was writing my poetry, the pain, whatever I was feeling in me, in one way or another, I was either painting rocks or writing my poetry or whatever to alchemize my frustration, my sadness about how things were going, about all this lockdown and about this division amongst people. I started realizing because of this COVID that a lot of people were having been locked down, it was bringing up their trauma. And not necessarily intergenerational trauma like it was for me, but it was trauma from their childhood. Because everyone has some sort of trauma that carries down from generation to generation. And if you're a child of often, where there have been so many wars, and your mother has come from a dysfunctional family, a family where returned servicemen who didn't have counselling, didn't have post-traumatic, all that support, they would come home and they would be upset, they'd be angry, the kids would be scared, the wives would be scared, the drinking, the alcohol, the drugs, and then the abuse started. So I could see the fear in a lot, and I decided that I was going to start running some workshops, and I called them From a Rock to a Hard Place and Beyond. The alchemy of story, art and healing. And I started running these workshops, and the women started sharing stories that had to be childhood stories that impacted on them, that changed their lives, that were a memory for them. And as they did this, the tears would come up, but they were often sharing a story in a safe place that they had never shared with anyone before, and the pain was coming up. So I took it to the next level in art, where they would put their story through using music onto a rock. And that rock, which has been around for thousands of years, no matter what it's been through, it's still there, and it's forgiving, and it's like our earth, which is a rock, and we're on this rock, and no matter what is done to her, she keeps giving us back our food, our shelter, birds, the beauty. She's just so forgiving. So I sort of saw this rock as being really important in this journey of forgiveness for themselves. And so from the story, they would have their rock and they would put their tears into the rock. And after we finished, we would sit down around a table and we'd play music, and blindfolded, they would, with the music and a pencil and a bit of paper, would just start letting their hands move. Totally spontaneously, without judging themselves, without criticizing themselves. They would just do whatever felt right. Then the blindfolds would come off, and then the music would play again, and they would do it with colour, with 3 colours. Once they chose the design that they wanted, they would put that onto the rock. And then that rock became their talisman, something they could carry around, something they knew represented their story, their pain, and their forgiveness of themselves, and the forgiveness for their family and their parents, and whatever pain they had. That people do what we do the best way we know at the time, but once we forgive, we can start healing. So I believe in the power of art, creativity, the way we can change things through our words, through our music, through our conversations, our stories, and our art. And if we do this, and every one of us can, we can be fully whole again.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Was that okay?
That was wonderful, Nina.
Thank you.
Where's my thumb? There it is. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Karen.
We can edit that out.
Well, you could leave